What's something you see that's important?
Small candles are 350 and large candles are $5.
Okay, so how would, okay, small candles.
I only got that far.
Okay, so what else is important here? Olivia?
At least 20 candles.
At least 20 candles. Okay, what else? Okay, so there shouldn't be talking in the class unless we're answering the question. So before we move on, we want to actually define some variables. So we want to define a variable for how many small candles there are. So what's a way we can define how many small candles there are?
Alright. Oh, wait. You do it. X. Yeah.
Okay, so we could say x is equal to number of small candles. And then what about for large candles? What's a way we can define large candles? Justin, are you raising your hand?
Yeah, like L.
Okay.
Large.
What if you do an X?
Okay, I mean, we could do L. It's fine. Sure.
Let's do a fancy L.
Because it's hard to differentiate for me ones and L's. So. Okay, so what I want to think about here, the very first thing I want to think about is how do we know how many candles Jonah bought? So just talking about candles, how do we know how much Jonah bought?
Alright, so you do the equal to and then the greater sign. Because if you do equal to 20 candles or more than 20 candles.
Okay, so you're saying that Jonah buys at least or more than 20 candles. So you're saying that Jonah will buy at least 20 or more. So the side that Jonah buys is going to be more than 20. Okay, great. What else? What's another way to represent how many candles that Jonah buys? Okay, so what's another way to represent how many candles Jonah bought? And I'm going to move this up so we can just focus on the information we have so far. What's a way to represent, so in order to understand how many candles Jonah bought altogether, how many small candles did Jonah buy?
I don't know.
What represents the total amount of small candles Jonah bought? And I want you to think about what we just did. So what did we use to represent all the small candles that Jonah bought? Right, X, right? And now what represents all of the large candles that Jonah bought? So if we were to total up how many candles that Jonah bought, right, it would be X plus L. So the total amount of candles is represented by X plus L, and we know that that is greater or equal to 20, right? So we know that X plus L is greater than or equal to 20. So we've already solved for one of our inequalities. We can solve for another one. So now we want to make an inequality about how much money does Jonah spend.
Okay, so we do the less than sign and the equal to sign. Because it can't be more than 20.
Okay, so Jonah can't spend more than $80, but he can spend up to $80. So I want us to think about, how do we represent just how much money that Jonah spent just on small candles? Okay, so again, I want you to think about, how do we know how much money Jonah spent just on small candles? Okay, so how much does Jonah spend per small candle?
$3.50.
Okay, so is there a way we can put those two together?
And then $3.50.
Okay, I would just switch the order to make it a little easier. But yeah, to represent how much money Jonah spends on each small candle, then I would say it's 3.5 x, right? Because if Jonah buys one candle, then it would be 3.5 times 1. If Jonah buys 10 candles, it would be 3.5 times 10, right? So for each candle, he spends an additional $3.5, right? So you do 3.5 times however many candles he buys. Okay, we want to use that same thought process to total how much money did Jonah spend just on large candles. Just on large candles. Okay, so if we just wrote L, that would just represent how many candles that Jonah bought. But how do we represent how much money he spends per candle? $5. How do we put those two together? 5, right, 5 and L. So 5L represents total So you can see here that 3.5x represents how much money, the total amount of money that Jonah spent just on small candles. And 5L represents the total spent on large candles. So again, we want to think about this. How do we know how much money total that Jonah spent just on candles? We put it together, and how do we put it together? We just do. Right, 3.5x plus 5L. So the reason why we write it like this is because for each small candle, it costs $3.5. For each large candle, it costs $5. So the total cost is going to be these added up together, because that's how much money that Jonah spends, right? So now that we have our two inequalities, this is the first half of the problem. Okay, this is the first half, just to write the inequalities. After this, you've done a lot of the problem, and the second part of the problem is to graph it and then answer the questions. So we're going to talk about that today.